Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Sports Bandits. I'm Austin.
And I'm Brian.
This week we're going to be answering your questions. That's right, you guys submitted questions on our Facebook page and we'll be answering them this week. Kira, what's our first question?
Our first question was asked by Hayden Edgman. What do you make of the three teams waiving legal rights to allow A&M to go to the SEC? Is it a sign they are staying or a sign they're going?
Well, this is the first question in a long string of conference realignment questions we got this week. I think that this isn't a sign that they are staying or going. I think this is a sign that they are confident in their position in this conference, or in this whole conference realignment setting. I feel that these three schools are very confident in wherever they end up, that they're going to be successful and make plenty of money. So I think they don't really care if A&M leaves, that they can find a replacement for the Big 12, or if A&M leaves and they have to relocate to another conference, that they're going to be just fine. I think that's what this means.
I think that's actually a great interpretation of it. Of course, should they be that confident? Well, we don't know. I'm mainly referencing Texas Tech there because I think Oklahoma and Texas will find a home if they want to find a home. But personally, I think that means the conference is probably going to stay together at least for now. BYU, I think, is the real key here, though. If BYU wants to join and will join, and they can get all the details of that worked out, I think Oklahoma will stay, which will in turn make the rest of the teams waive the legal rights and say, okay, you can leave A&M. But if BYU decides, oh, we're going to stay independent or go anywhere else, I think Oklahoma is going to start having very serious talks with the Pac-12, possibly Pac-16, which will in turn bring OSU to follow, and then probably Texas and Texas Tech right after that.
Our next question was asked by Chris Davis and Andy Melvin. Where is everyone going to end up at the end of all this?
Well, Chris and Andy, this is a really good question. Of course, as I said before, I do think the conference is going to stay together. The Big 12 is going to stay together at least for a little while. But if they don't, here's where I think everybody's going to end up. I think Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas, and Texas Tech, as aforementioned, plus OSU, they're going to head west to the Pac-16. I think Kansas, Kansas State, Missouri, and Baylor will all go to the Big East, which is now going to have the greatest basketball conference ever. They might not be that great at football, but darn it, they're going to have 20 teams in an NCAA tournament every year in basketball. And the oddball it leaves out there is Iowa State, and I do not see a major conference wanting Iowa State. They don't perform well at any sport, and honestly, I think they're probably going to go down to something like the Conference USA or something like the MAC, which will be good for them. It'll give them a chance to rebuild, start getting some wins, possibly rebuild their recruiting, make some lower bowl games. Because that's what Iowa State needs right now. It's to regenerate interest in this program.
Yeah, well, where I see everyone ending up in all this is to be determined, honestly. There's still a lot to be said and done here, and I could change my opinion on this tomorrow if new news comes out. But as of right now, I see everyone staying where they are, and Texas A&M leaving to go to the SEC eventually once these legal rights get waived, and the Big 12 adding one more team, most likely BYU. If anything else, I see the legal rights not getting resolved and Texas A&M staying in the Big 12 conference until the contract expires, and then we'll have a whole new mess of problems once that happens because many teams might want to leave. But as of right now, I really think that pretty much not a whole lot's going to change, and our structure is going to stay pretty sound in the way it is right now.
But if A&M left as well, you could also see the Big 12 trying to go back to 12 teams. Maybe add a Houston as well. That Houston market's going to be lost if A&M leaves. Would Big 12 even consider SMU? I mean, I don't think so.
Well, I really think the biggest loser in all this battle is TCU. They committed too early to a conference that maybe wasn't a good fit for them in the Big East. If they would have waited around one more year for all this to happen, the Big 12 could have said goodbye to Texas A&M and added TCU very easily, and it would have been a great fit. So I really feel that TCU is the biggest loser in all this conference realignment.
Yeah, maybe a loser geographically, but they are finally in a power conference. I know it's what their football team has been looking for.
But I think they would have been in a power conference eventually anyway if they would have waited out for the Big 12.
Too true.
Our third question was also asked by Hayden. If the Pac-16 forms, how many divisions will there be, and how will play be structured?
Well, this is a very good question, and I think that there will be 2 8-team divisions if it does come to this. I think there are a lot of problems with a quote mega conference. I see there being more than just this issue being a problem of geographical location, travel. Yeah, they're going to make more money, but there are going to be a lot more problems involved in conference play. But I do feel that there will be 2 8-team divisions. In football, you'll play every team in your division once, meaning 7 conference games there, and half the teams in the other division of the conference every 2 years for 2 years. Again, that creates 11 conference games, and then a potential championship game, which is 12, leaving room for 1 non-conference game. Maybe 2 if you want to eventually have a 15-game season with a championship and a bowl game. That's really stretching the boundaries of college football right there. You've got to fit these games into a window of a college semester. It's not like the NFL where you can just play through December. I mean, these kids need time off to do things. I mean, they're college students. Let's stay real about this. So I really think that the way that they would end up doing it is 2 divisions of 8 teams, but again, there are so many problems that would have to be solved in these mega conferences.
I agree. I think two 8-team divisions is the best because that makes the best ideal situation for a conference championship game, 2 division winners meeting, not having to have 4 division winners and then you take the top 2, or you have to play a playoff, a Pac-12, Pac-16 playoff. That would just be a bit insane. I'd say you do the 7 teams in your division, but I would only play 2 non-conference or 2 non-divisional conference games, which would say you play every team, once every 4 years. But still, that honestly, you can hear the problem with that. You only play someone in your conference every 4 years, which is a problem in itself. I mean, and it's going to be 8 years until every 8 years that they come and play you at home. So, I mean, there's a lot of problems. And we haven't even discussed other sports impacts.
Yeah.
There will be schools that have to cut programs. And since you have to cut a women's program, you have to cut a men's program as well to stay in line with Title IX. And so you're going to see programs getting cut everywhere if you have something with a mega conference. It's not, you can't imagine a team like Washington to have to go play volleyball down at Texas one Wednesday and then Texas Tech the next Wednesday. And then another week later they have to come down in the middle of the week and come play at OSU. It's not fair to all these other sports. Because football is what everyone's looking at over here, but you're forgetting how many other sports there are. There are 83 NCAA championships, and you're forgetting all the rest of them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like I said, there are just millions of problems all the way through this whole thing, and that's one of the reasons why I do feel that the conference structure will stay close to the way it is. I mean, geographical location plays a huge part in multiple aspects of conferences, and by adding these mega conferences, it creates a geographical nightmare.
Right. I mean, are you going to be flying your softball team everywhere every week? Are you going to fly the men's gymnastics team every other day? I mean, it's a geographical nightmare, and people haven't looked hard enough at this but after they say 16-team conference, and I think everybody says, oh my goodness, we have UT and USC are playing every year, or Oklahoma's playing USC every year. Oh, wouldn't that be cool? But I don't know if those rivalries are going to develop the way people want them to. Everyone's going to say, this could be historic and amazing. It's like, how many fans are going to travel? You haven't even talked about the fans. A lot of fans, will travel to road games. But, I mean, if every weekend you're going out from Oklahoma out to Washington, then to Northern California, then to Southern California, it's too much on the fan as well.
Yeah. And in an unrelated topic, depending on if you find cheating sexy or not, then the answer to the sexiest Yankee is no.
No.
No, there are no sexy Yankees.
Our last question was asked by Kyle Mattingly. Could mega conferences ultimately end up leading us toward a playoff structure?
Well, Kyle, it could. It provides a great framework. If you have one conference champion from each of the 4 conferences, then you have a 4-team playoff, which is just 2 semifinals and a championship, which everybody would love right now. I think that'd be great. You could even have 2 teams from each conference. It sets it up right to have, the same number of teams come from each conferences and have maybe a 4-team or an 8-team or 16-team, whatever. The problem is the same problem that we've been having this whole time. It's the greedy pigs who are in charge of college football right now. They don't care about crowning a national championship. They don't care what's in their left pocket for the national championship. I'm sorry, I'm not making any sense, but this is something that's honestly dear to me. Is they don't give jack squat what happens in the game. They just want their money. And that's all that's ever been talked about, and that's all that ever will be talked about, at least in the near future.
Yeah, I think that the mega conferences, while there are a lot of problems, one problem that it could help solve is a playoff, a way to facilitate a playoff. I think that the mega conferences would be a great way to facilitate a playoff. You just have one or two teams. I think you could even do the champions being 4, and then have like 2 non-AQ schools, and then the next 2 highest in the rankings or something from the 4 mega conferences. There's so many ways to go about it to get a number of teams that would fit into a tournament bracket out of 4 mega conferences. But again, you're adding more games onto a mega conference schedule that already has too many games. So, I mean, while it would help, it's going to also create more problems for these teams trying to figure out how to play their entire conference schedule. What it may end up doing is you only play the teams in your division every year and then play the champion from the other division. So basically it's like having 2 small conferences within a mega conference, and the winners play each other in a pre-playoff thing, and it'd be pretty much what we have now with a playoff system. So it could end up getting really messed up and really confusing, but yes, I think that ultimately the mega conferences would be a way to facilitate a playoff in college football.
We better move on to the picks before I say something that I don't mean to say, or say something that doesn't have any meaning altogether. Okay, last week I went 2-2 in my picks. Brian, down week, 1-3, but we'll see who gets back on track this week.
Hey, last year I was like perfect through the first 3 shows, so cut me some slack. I'll come back.
Okay, just slow start here for Brian.
Yeah.
But we'll start this week in Happy Valley. Penn State hosts Alabama. Brian, what do you see happening?
Well, I think this is going to be one of the best games of the week, surprisingly. I mean, you usually look at a Big Ten SEC matchup and you're going to take the SEC team every time. But as this has been thrown around a lot this week, last season, Bama really kind of poured it on Penn State at Bama, and Penn State had a first-year starting quarterback coming into an SEC school, and that's just a recipe for disaster. Well, this year, Alabama's got 2 apparently accident-prone quarterbacks who threw 1 less interception in their first game than McElroy did in his entire season last year with Alabama. So I see the Alabama offense struggling a lot in this game, but what's going to pull Alabama through is their defense that returned 10 starters from last year. And I think that Alabama will be able to pull this one out, but this will be a very low-scoring game.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think Bama's going to win this game, but I think it'll be a close, competitive game. Should be a very fun game to watch, especially if you love a good defensive struggle like the Steelers and the Ravens. This is just going to be a couple of good teams doing a whiteout at Penn State. You know, fans at Penn State love doing the whiteout. But I think Bama will still get the win. They're the SEC. They're a very good school, a little more experience, and that defense, I think, in the end is going to pull it out. Something like 14-10, something like that.
All right, well, we're going to move on to the first night game at the Big House when Notre Dame comes in after losing to South Florida last week, and Michigan coming off a win against Western Michigan where they maybe didn't look that impressive last week. Austin, who do you have in this game?
Well, assuming they complete the whole game this week and don't end after the third quarter like Michigan did this week, I think Notre Dame's going to find a way to win this. They're both solid teams with problems, with visible problems that you can see. But Notre Dame, I thought, showed a lot of resiliency last week. Dane Christ came on and just laid a goose egg. It was terrible. Now he's going to be sitting out this week. Brian Kelly made the switch, and now I think Notre Dame is going to have a new rejuvenation. They were embarrassed last week to lose to South Florida, but at Michigan, you got Denard Robinson. I think he'll be the main part of the offense for Michigan. But I think Notre Dame is going to carry that momentum they had in the fourth quarter against South Florida and squeak out a win.
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with you on this one. I think Notre Dame looked more than pathetic last week, and they did have some bright spots throughout the game, but still, you lose to South Florida, and that's just not pleasing to look at. Whereas Michigan, they did have their struggles, but what team typically doesn't on week 1? Everyone's shaking off the rust. I wasn't impressed by Michigan, but I wasn't impressed by Notre Dame. I think Michigan playing at home has an advantage, and I think that Denard Robinson is going to take over this game like Robert Griffin did for Baylor last weekend, and I think he puts up some stats like that and really surprises some people, and Michigan takes this game.
Okay. Our next game is down in Austin, Texas, at a potential future Big 12 game. BYU taking on the Texas Longhorns. Brian, what do you see happening?
Well, I think this is going to be another really good game and could come down to a last-second field goal on an extra second. But I think that BYU, they're going to be trying to prove something here, and Texas is also going to be trying to prove something, surprisingly. But I think in the end, BYU is going to be the team that's going to take this by just a few points. And I really think that they're going to come in wanting to show that they can compete and belong in the Big 12. A couple years ago, they knocked off Oklahoma down in Jerry Jones' new stadium, and I think that they're going to try to come back and do the same thing to Texas that they did to Oklahoma, and I think they're going to succeed.
I think BYU is going to take this game, and here's why. Jake Heaps had a pretty good game last week, 24-38, a touchdown and an interception. But you got to look at the BYU defense. They scored a touchdown in that game over Ole Miss, which basically in the end was the difference maker. They won 14-13. I think the BYU defense will be able to slow down Garrett Gilbert, who's still trying to come into his own this year. And I think BYU will be able to win it by a field goal.
Our last game this week, South Carolina heads down to Georgia for an SEC matchup that appears to be pretty good. Austin, what's your take on this game?
Well, Georgia was embarrassed last week at basically home by Boise State. They were embarrassed. They are kind of fire lit under them now, and they're going to want to come out in front of their home fans and do a number on South Carolina. But that's not going to happen. South Carolina's one of the better teams in the SEC this year. I think South Carolina, behind quarterback Matt Garcia, is going to be able to win this game by putting up a lot of points.
Yeah, I think that South Carolina started really slow last week. Actually, I don't think that. I know that. ECU jumped up big on them, and I think that South Carolina is going to let that carry over, and they're going to start really strong and really put it on Georgia at the beginning of the game, and it's really going to discourage Georgia, and Georgia's going to get down on themselves, and USC is going to take this one. Different USC than the one in Southern California, the one on the East Coast. But I think South Carolina and the old ball coach are going to take this one pretty easily.
Well, thanks for watching this week's episode. Be sure to ask your questions on our Facebook page. Our Facebook page is The Sports Bandits. You'll see our pretty faces with the green futon in the background is the profile picture. Leave your questions about college football, life in general, but we're more likely to answer the questions about the college football because that's what we know best. So be sure to tune in next week to see if your questions get answered. I'm Austin.
I'm Brian.